I am going to present the NDC, but as the chair has just said, I should give a brief background. As signatories to the Paris Agreement, we have to submit our nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. We have submitted our first NDC, and now it is the 5-year period in which we have to then submit our updated NDC. This is a communication that we submit to the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework and Convention on Climate Change. And as signatories, we have to give this update. It is not our national plan, let me say, Chair, because we do have the National Climate Change Response Policy and the draft climate change bill, which the minister referred to earlier, that are how we are going to move as a country from where we are to the future that we envisage. But here it's our communication to the UNFCCC, and we are saying as a country, this is going to be our contribution as a country to the big global goals of the UNFCCC. So let me not spend much time, Chair, except to go straight into the presentation as I committed to 10 minutes. We have had a series of considerations as we were preparing this document. I've had consultations as well with some of our partner departments in coming up with this document. But Chair, the minister also indicated that it is out for public comment. I'm going to my last slide talks to the consultation process and the pathway before we actually submit to the UNFCCC. Here I'm going to talk about the key considerations that we made in order to come up with this document. First of all, we've looked at our national circumstances as a country, in the fact that we're a developing country, including our issues around poverty, unemployment, and inequality in our society. We have looked at the legal requirements under the Paris Agreement and associated decisions, as well as the latest science, what it says about the climate change now. We've looked also at the current state of the international climate change regime regarding other countries, increasing their mitigation ambitions, and a key consideration of what other parties are doing in this regard so that we can align. The consideration of what South Africa's fair contribution to the global mitigation effort should be in light of the latest science. We've considered that as well. We've looked at our likely greenhouse gas emissions in 2025 and 2030 with the implementation of current planned mitigation policies, which Minister Mantashe and Patel spoke to. I'm not going to repeat that, but we have considered all the government big policies that are taking us to a low carbon economy in the near term, including the carbon tax and the energy efficiency strategy. We've looked at the current status of the implementation of our greenhouse gas mitigation systems, as well as the draft climate change bill and the full implementation of the MRV system and the rollout of the carbon budget system and sectoral emission targets. Finally, Chair, we've also considered strongly our national climate change adaptation strategy, which has been approved by Cabinet in the key sectors to sustain the operationalization of the global goal on climate change adaptation. Next slide. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go into the proposed mitigation. Previous slide, please, Doctor. To the proposed mitigation target ranges that we have. So our greenhouse gas emissions will be in the range of 398 and 510 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent in 2025, and in the range of 398 and 440 megatons carbon dioxide equivalent in 2030. The 2025 target range will allow time to fully implement the national mitigation system, including those elements contained in the draft climate change bill, and also allow space for the implementation of the IRP 2019, which Minister Mantashe spoke to, and other key policies and measures, as well as the national recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. During this period of 2021 and 2025, after the passing of the climate change bill, we will then be implementing phase 2 of the carbon budgets program, and phase 2 of the carbon tax will also be implemented. Sectoral emission targets will be established, and this commission will be facilitating the implementation of the Just Transition Program. For the 2030 target range, which will further require the implementation of currently planned policies, which I'm not going to repeat again, with the continued implementation of the other instruments like the carbon tax, energy efficiency program, and so on. Both the 2025 and 2030 targets are consistent with South Africa's fair share, and also they're an ambitious improvement on our current NDC target, which I'm going to explain in the next slide with this graph, Chair. As you can see, this graph presents our proposed NDC targets in relation to our current greenhouse gas emissions to better understand the risk of not achieving these targets. The red and the green bars are the greenhouse gas emissions, which would result from different degrees of implementation of currently planned policies and measures. The bottom of each bar are where emissions would be with full implementation, and the top of each bar are where emissions would be with no implementation at all. The gray bars on each of the ends of these bars that I'm referring to are to take into account some errors in our greenhouse gas emissions inventory. The green bar is assuming a moderate growth rate in our economy, and the red bar assumes a high growth rate. However, we have been advised that it is unlikely to have the high growth rate of 5.4% each year from 2021 because of the current economic challenges that we are experiencing. All of these are explained in the blue bars, which are the likely emission target ranges for the year 2025 and year 2020. And the pink areas on each side of this blue bars each represent the uncertainty in the inventory that I was talking about. These can be easily compared to the proposed target ranges. For 2025, there is therefore very little chance that South Africa's emissions will not be below the top range of the proposed target of 510. And for 2030, at least some policy implementation is required for emissions to be below the top range of 440. Finally, it can be seen from the pink bar, Chair, to the right of the graph that the 2030 proposed target is squarely within South Africa's fair share range. Sorry about that. But I just want to also point out, Chair, as you look at this slide, that when you look at the 2025 target, it is 17% reduction of what we committed in the current NDC. And the 2030 target is a 28% reduction of what we committed in the current NDC, which is quite some improvements. Next slide. Next slide, please. In this part of the presentation, I'm going to talk to the adaptation component of the NDC. And just to mention that South Africa is one of the only countries to communicate adaptation in our NDC. It is one of the instruments under which the Paris Agreement will be implemented in the country. The global goal on adaptation is designed to facilitate the sharing of national adaptation challenges and actions in order to understand the international progress in achieving this goal. South Africa has played a significant role in shaping the global goal on adaptation, and in this context, we are among the first countries to submit our adaptation communication with our NDC. The proposed adaptation component of South Africa's updated NDC is informed by a technical analysis that we've undertaken with the CSIR to provide the backing of the science into this part of the work. The adaptation communication includes providing information on relevant national circumstances, institutional arrangements, and legal frameworks, impacts, risks, and vulnerability, national adaptation priorities, strategies, plans, goals, and actions, which are all required and support needed to report on the adaptation efforts of all developing countries. This adaptation communication is fully aligned with our cabinet-approved National Climate Change Adaptation Strategy. Next slide, please. Next slide, yes. The key adaptation goals contained in our adaptation communication outlines 5 goals as part of our contribution towards the global community's effort to achieve the global goal on adaptation. And goal 1 of this is to enhance climate change adaptation governance and legal frameworks. Goal 2 is to develop and understand the impact of South Africa of the 2 degrees and 1.5 degree global warming and the underlying global emission pathways through geospatial mapping of the physical climate hazards and adaptation needs in the context of strengthening the key sectors of the economy. Goal 3 talks to the implementation of our climate change strategy interventions between the period 2021 to 2030. And goal 4 is the mobilization of funds for adaptation implementation through multilateral funding mechanisms. The last goal talks to the quantification and acknowledgement of the national adaptation and resilient efforts in the country. Next slide. So this one talks to basically the means of implementation for this updated NDC. And this is contained as part of our support requirements as a developing country, as provided for in Articles 9 and 11 of the Paris Agreement. The support section consists of 3 sections. First is to support the support requirements are summarized qualitatively. Secondly, the cost of both mitigation and adaptation measures are outlined. And finally, South Africa's goal for accessing international support is defined. So far, we have been accessing approximately 2 billion per year for 2018 and 2019, and we look into the target of accessing about $8 billion per year in this proposed NDC, which is 4 times the amount we've been accessing annually by the year 2030, and to mobilize a far greater amount on this basis for mitigation and adaptation. Alignment of the NDC targets of the country with planned policies and measures will provide a basis for us to mobilize these funds. Here, Chair, I'm just talking to the overall process, informing the draft updated NDC till submission. We have done the necessary research, as I've previously indicated. We have obtained cabinet approval for stakeholder consultations, and these are going ahead as I speak. Today we are receiving the last written inputs, and we are going to be receiving more inputs in the verbal consultations that we are having at this point. And then we're going to integrate all the stakeholder inputs into the documents and then table it again to cabinet and submit it to the UNFCCC before the COP26. Next slide. So I'm not going to repeat this. I've spoken to it a little bit in the previous slide, the timeframes for consultation, and I do hope that, Chair, I have aligned myself to the speed of 10 minutes, that I can now leave this slide here as the last one for members to look at the actual dates that are there. But we have a link that is provided to members of the public in the website of the department, and we are still receiving verbal inputs. Thank you very much, Chair, for the opportunity to share our work with the Commission.